My name is John Hartwell, and for 81 years I have lived on the same piece of land that my father cleared with his own hands. 40 acres of stubborn Oklahoma clay, dry most of the year, good for nothing except grass, cattle, and memories that refuse to die. People drive by the old Hartwell farm and see a collapsing barn, a sagging porch, a field that hasn't been plowed in 10 years. What they don't see is the history buried under every fence post and under the oak tree where my father taught me to shoot when I was 12. This land is not just soil to me. It is bone, blood, and the sound of my father's boots in the dust. Every morning starts the same. I boil coffee on the old gas stove, sit by the window that faces east, and watch the sun rise over the pasture. There's no one to talk to except Blue, my half-blind cattle dog, who follows me everywhere. I talk to him sometimes, and to Martha, my late wife, whose picture stands on the shelf above the fireplace. She's been gone 9 years now, but sometimes I catch myself turning my head when the kettle whistles, expecting her to say, "You let it boil too long again, John." After she died, the house became unbearably quiet. Even the clock seemed to tick slower, as if out of respect. I don't complain. Silence is the only honest company I have left. My daughter, Sheila, lives 2 hours away in Tulsa. We haven't been close in years. She comes around on holidays, sometimes with her boy, but she never stays long. Always in a hurry, always checking her phone, her car engine still running when she says goodbye. When Martha was alive, Sheila would at least call every week, pretending to care about how we were. But after the funeral, her calls turned into quick texts. "You okay, Dad? Need anything?" That's modern love, I guess. Convenient and bloodless. I don't blame her entirely. The world she lives in doesn't have time for old men who fix fences and read the Bible before bed. Still, there are moments when I catch myself waiting for her call. Around supper time, when the light gets soft and the wind carries the smell of dust and cattle from the neighbor's ranch, I find myself listening for the ring. It never comes. Sometimes I imagine she's just busy. Other times I tell myself she's forgotten I exist. Both explanations hurt in different ways. When you get old, you start rationing your illusions like medicine. You take just enough to get through the day. My days are simple. I keep the place tidy, mend the gate, feed Blue, drive once a week into town for supplies. Folks at the hardware store know me by name. They still call me Mr. Hartwell, even though most of them are young enough to be my grandchildren. They mean well, but they look at me with that polite pity people reserve for the elderly, the kind that says, "You're still here? Amazing." I smile back, buy what I need, and go home. I prefer the company of my land to the company of people who already imagine me gone. The only visitors I get are the seasons. Spring brings mud and bluebonnets. Summer, dust and heat that makes the air tremble. Autumn, the smell of smoke and dying grass. Winter is my favorite. It strips everything bare, leaves the world honest and quiet. That's how I like it. Still, I can't deny that the silence has a weight to it. Some evenings, when the wind rattles the barn doors, I feel that weight pressing on my chest like a sleeping animal. It's the kind of loneliness that doesn't need a name. It just settles in your bones and stays. There's one thing I've never let go of. The shotgun my father gave me in 1968, a double-barreled Winchester with walnut stock, worn smooth from years of use. It hangs above the mantel, clean, oiled, and loaded. My father's words still echo in my head. "Land's worth nothing if you can't defend it." Back then, I thought he was talking about coyotes or thieves. Now I know he meant something bigger. The slow erosion of respect, of memory, of a man's place in his own family. I've never fired it since he passed, but I clean it every month like a ritual. It's not about the gun. It's about remembering who I am. When Martha got sick, Sheila promised to visit more often, but she came only twice before the end. Both times she looked uncomfortable, as if death were contagious. She talked more about her job and her bills than about her mother. The day Martha died, Sheila stood at the foot of the bed, silent, staring at her watch. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her the time didn't matter anymore, but I didn't. I just held Martha's hand until it grew cold. After the funeral, Sheila sold most of her mother's jewelry to pay off her credit cards. I didn't say a word. I figured there was no point starting a war over things when the person they belonged to was gone. For a while, I thought about selling the farm myself. The taxes, the maintenance. It all seemed pointless without Martha. But every time I imagined signing the deed away, something in me froze. I could almost hear my father's voice whispering, "Don't let it go, son. Not to them." I didn't know who them was back then, but I think I do now. It's the ones who see land as numbers on paper, not as the ground that holds your family's bones. That's why I stayed. That's why I still get up before dawn and walk the fence line, even when my knees feel like glass. About a year ago, Sheila started hinting about investment opportunities. She said developers were buying up rural properties around here to build solar farms and vacation homes. "You could make a killing, Dad," she said over the phone. "You don't even use half that land anymore." I told her it wasn't about use. She laughed, that short, impatient laugh of hers that sounds like a slap. "You can't take it with you," she said. "Maybe not. But I can damn well decide who doesn't get it." Since then, she's been more persistent, calling more often, not to ask how I'm doing, but to ask if I've thought about it. Each time I say no, her tone grows colder, like a lawyer rehearsing a case. Last month, she sent me a brochure for a retirement community in Tulsa. Pool, medical staff, active lifestyle. I tore it in half. The idea of dying surrounded by strangers makes my skin crawl. I've buried too many people to believe that comfort means anything in the end. 2 weeks ago, she called again, sounding unusually cheerful. "Dad, I'm coming by this weekend," she said. "I want you to meet someone." I could tell by her tone it wasn't just a casual visit. There was a purpose in her voice, a rehearsed warmth. I asked who, but she said only, "You'll see. You'll like him. He's got good ideas about land." That last word stuck in my mind like a splinter. Land. Not you, not us, not home. Just land. I hung up feeling uneasy but also curious. After all, it had been almost a year since she last visited. Maybe this was her way of making peace. I wanted to believe that. Old men are good at lying to themselves. The night before she was due, I couldn't sleep. I walked the house, touching the walls, the old photographs, the furniture that still smelled faintly of Martha's perfume. Everything in this house has a story, and every story is tied to this dirt. I found myself standing by the window, staring out at the moonlit pasture, the fences silver in the dark. Somewhere a coyote howled, and Blue lifted his head, ears twitching. "It's all right, boy," I whispered. "Ain't nothing out there we can't handle." But for the first time, I wasn't sure if I believed it. Sheila arrived late on a Saturday afternoon, driving a white SUV that looked brand new and far too expensive for someone who had always claimed she was struggling to make ends meet. The air shimmered with heat that day, the kind that presses down on you like a heavy blanket. And I remember thinking that even the sky looked tired. Blue barked when the car stopped by the front gate, his old bones still loyal enough to sound the alarm. I stepped onto the porch, wiping my hands on a rag, expecting my daughter to step out with that rushed, distracted look she always wore. Instead, The first person out of the car was a man I had never seen before. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe mid-30s, with a trimmed beard and a smug, restless expression that told me he was used to being listened to. He wore jeans that looked too clean to be real work clothes and a shirt unbuttoned halfway down, showing a thin gold chain and a sunburn that hadn't yet turned brown. When Sheila got out on the other side, she looked nervous, like a teenager introducing her parents to a boyfriend she wasn't quite sure about. "Dad," she called, forcing a smile. "This is Derek. Derek, this is my father, John." The man grinned, that kind of grin that never reaches the eyes. He extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, sir. Sheila's told me so much about this place." His handshake was too firm, the kind men use to prove something. I nodded, not returning the smile. "You're here for a visit, or is this business?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Sheila's shoulders stiffened. "Both, I guess. We wanted to talk to you about something important." She said it the way people do when they're about to sell you something or apologize for wrecking your car. I invited them inside. The house felt smaller with them in it, filled suddenly with perfume and cologne and voices that didn't belong. Derek wandered around the living room, pretending to admire the photos on the wall. Wedding pictures, harvest days, a faded black and white of my father standing by the barn with his shotgun. "Nice place," he said, with that tone city people use when they mean the opposite. "A lot of history here." I didn't answer. I poured coffee for Sheila and myself, offered him some, but he declined. He looked like the type who only drank things that came in tall glasses with ice and names he couldn't pronounce. Sheila sat down at the kitchen table, folding and unfolding her napkin. "Dad, we've been thinking. This land, it's a lot for one person to take care of. You're still living out here alone, and that worries me. You should be somewhere safe, with people around, maybe closer to town." I didn't say anything, just stirred my coffee slowly. "There's an offer," she continued, glancing at Derek. "Some developers want to buy property in this area. They're building eco-homes, modern, efficient, sustainable. They'd pay you well above market price. It could set you up for life." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. "Set me up for life?" I said. "What life do you think I'm waiting for at 81? She sighed. "Dad, don't start. This is an opportunity. Derek works with them. He knows how these deals go." Derek leaned forward, resting his arms on the table, like he owned it. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm going to be honest with you. This land is valuable, but not in the way you think. It's got solar potential. Flat terrain, open exposure. There's a plan for a renewable energy project in this county. If you hold out too long, the government will probably rezone it and you'll get next to nothing. Right now, though, you could make a clean sale. We're talking mid-six figures." I studied him for a long moment. "You talk like a man who's already counted the money." He smirked. "I just hate seeing good folks miss their chance. Sheila says you've had trouble keeping up with taxes, with repairs." "Did she?" I interrupted. Sheila flushed red. "I didn't mean it like that, Dad. I just meant you shouldn't have to worry about this place anymore." That was when something inside me turned cold. It wasn't the offer. It was the way she said this place, like it was just a piece of dirt, not the ground her grandfather is buried under, not the home where she took her first steps. I realized then that she didn't see it as home anymore. To her, it was just property, a line on a spreadsheet. I'd seen that look before, on the faces of bankers and landmen who came sniffing around during the drought years. The only difference was that those men weren't my blood. "I'm not selling," I said quietly. "Not now, not ever." Derek chuckled, a dry, disrespectful sound. Sir, with all due respect, everybody says that until they see the check. I looked at him, then at my daughter. You brought him here to convince me, didn't you? Not to visit, not to see your father, just to talk me out of my land. Sheila's voice trembled. It's not like that. I thought maybe if you heard it from someone who understands the business side. The business side of betrayal? I asked. She looked down. Derek shifted in his chair. Don't take it personal, Mr. Hartwell. It's just smart planning. You can't take the land with you, and it's not like your daughter wants to see it rot. That was when I stood up. My voice came out low, but steady. I've lived here my whole life. I watched my father die on this land, and my wife too. Every board, every fence post, every inch of this ground is paid for. You think you can come into my house, drink my coffee, and tell me it's time to sell? I don't care about your eco-homes or your investors. You can get out now. Sheila rose from her chair, eyes glassy. Dad, please, don't do this. I'm trying to help you. Help me? I said. By taking what's mine. You want to help me, Sheila? Then stop coming here with strangers who call me sir and talk about my home like it's a business deal. Derek stood up too, adjusting his belt buckle. We're wasting time. Let's go, babe. He said it with a smirk, and something in the way he said babe in my kitchen made my blood burn. Sheila looked at me one last time, her lips pressed tight. You'll regret this, Dad. You can't keep it forever. They left without another word. The SUV roared down the gravel road, raising a cloud of dust that hung in the air long after they were gone. I stood at the doorway until the dust settled, listening to the sound of cicadas in the heat. Blue came and sat by my feet, looking up at me as if asking whether they'd come back. Not if they know what's good for them, I said, though deep down I knew better. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, the shotgun glinting faintly above the fireplace. I wasn't afraid, not exactly. It was something else, a tightness in my chest, the sense that something sacred had been trespassed. I thought about Sheila's face when she said I'd regret it, about the way Derek looked around the house like he was already measuring it. My father's words came back to me. Land's worth nothing if you can't defend it. For the first time in decades, those words didn't sound like old wisdom. They sounded like a warning. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was over. Maybe they'd cool off, realize how foolish they'd been. I fed Blue, fixed the loose hinge on the gate, tried to push the thought away. But the silence felt different that day, heavier somehow, as if the land itself was holding its breath. In the distance, a hawk circled over the field, patient and sure, waiting for something to move. The week after their visit passed like a fever dream. The air itself seemed uneasy, heavy with a kind of quiet dread that didn't belong to the weather. Every sound on the property felt sharper. The squeal of the windmill, the creak of the porch boards, the groan of the barn door in the evening wind. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves, but the unease sat behind my ribs like a small stone that refused to dissolve. I didn't hear from Sheila or Derek for 4 days, and for a moment I thought maybe it was truly over, that they had gone back to their lives and left me to mine. I even allowed myself a faint relief, the kind that comes before the storm you don't see coming. On the 5th day, I found the first sign. An envelope was taped to my mailbox, no return address, just my name written in my daughter's sharp, impatient handwriting. Inside was a typed letter, neat and businesslike, not a trace of warmth. It said she had spoken with representatives of the development company, that they were willing to make a final offer, a sum that sounded impressive to anyone who had never worked for what they owned. It also mentioned something about a power of attorney document enclosed for my convenience, in case I couldn't come into town to sign in person. I remember staring at those words. Power of attorney, until the letters blurred. That was when I understood how far she was willing to go. I tore the papers in half, then in half again, until they were nothing but confetti in the dirt, and I burned them in an old coffee can behind the shed. But I kept the envelope. I wanted to remember how her handwriting looked when it stopped being a daughter's. That night, I poured myself a small glass of bourbon, first in months, and sat on the porch, watching the line of trees at the edge of the property fade into the dark. Blue lay beside me, his head on his paws. Too old now to chase anything, but still alert in that quiet, loyal way dogs have when they know something's wrong. The stars were thick overhead, the kind of sky that makes a man feel both blessed and forgotten. I thought about calling Sheila, about trying to reason with her. But what would I say? There's no reasoning with people who've decided your worth can be measured in dollars. The next morning I found tire tracks by the west fence, fresh ones. Whoever it was had come during the night. The gate latch was bent, the chain stretched like someone had forced it open. I followed the tracks for a few yards until they disappeared into the scrub, heading toward the county road. I didn't need to be a detective to know who had been there. The only thing that stopped me from calling the sheriff was pride. I didn't want to be the old fool complaining about family trespassing on his own land. Still, I cleaned the shotgun that afternoon, slow and deliberate, the way my father taught me, not out of fear, but out of habit, and maybe something darker than habit. 2 days later, they came again. It was early evening, the light low and golden, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it is. I was fixing the screen door when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the drive, the same white SUV. Blue started barking, that hoarse, protective bark he still managed when it mattered. My heart sank, not from fear, but from the heavy certainty that this was going to be worse than before. I stepped onto the porch, wiping my hands, and there they were, Sheila and Derek, dressed like they'd come from a meeting, not a visit. She was wearing sunglasses, even though the sun was almost gone, and he had that same restless energy, chewing gum, scanning the yard like he was taking inventory. "Evening, Dad," Sheila said. Her tone was rehearsed, too bright. "We thought we'd drop by. Talk a little more." "You already said what you had to say," I replied. "Not really," Derek cut in. "You didn't let us finish. We came to make things easier for you." I stepped down from the porch, just close enough to smell the cologne on him. "Easier," I said. "You think trying to rob a man of his home is easy work?" He smiled, slow and condescending. "Nobody's robbing anyone, old man. We're trying to do you a favor before someone else does it the hard way." Sheila put her hand on his arm as if to calm him. "Dad, don't listen to how he says things. Just listen to me. The company's serious. If you don't agree to sell now, they'll find a way to rezone the land. Eminent domain, environmental clearance, something like that. You'll lose it for pennies, and there's nothing anyone can do. Please, just sign now while you can still get something out of it." Her words felt like a slap. "While I can still get something out of it." The way she said it, with that pitying softness, made me feel like a ghost sitting in my own skin. "You really think I'd hand over my land because you threatened me with paperwork?" She took off her sunglasses then, and her eyes were glassy, tired. "I'm not threatening you, Dad. I'm trying to protect you. You're old. You don't understand how the world works now." I laughed bitterly. "The world hasn't changed that much, Sheila. Just the people in it." Derek stepped forward, his voice low and edged. "You can play stubborn, that's your right. But don't expect anyone to feel sorry when this all comes crashing down. People like you always think the law's on their side. It ain't. Not anymore." There was something in his tone that made Blue growl, a deep warning rumble that came from his chest. Derek looked down at the dog, sneered, and kicked a small rock in his direction. I took a step forward then, standing between him and the porch. "You touch that dog, you'll regret it." For a moment, no one moved. The sun had dipped low enough that their faces were half in shadow, and I could see the change in Sheila's expression, the fear, the uncertainty. She hadn't expected it to go this far. Derek, though, looked calm, almost pleased. He enjoyed it, the tension, the power of standing on another man's land and watching him defend it. "Come on, babe," he said finally, turning to her. "He's made his choice. Let him rot out here with his mutt and his ghosts." Sheila hesitated. "Dad, please." "I said go," I told her. My voice didn't rise, but it carried the kind of weight that comes from finality. She looked like she wanted to say something more, but Derek was already walking toward the car, keys jingling. Before she followed, she turned to me one last time. "You think you're doing the right thing," she said softly. "But this place will destroy you. It already is." When they left, I stood there until the sound of the engine faded. I felt drained, hollowed out, as if the argument had taken more from me than I could spare. Inside, the house seemed darker than before, even with the lights on. I sat at the table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee from earlier, and realized my hands were trembling. Not from fear, something worse, from disbelief that my own child could look at me and see an obstacle. Later that night, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice came through the machine, shaky and clipped. "Dad, I'm sorry about earlier." Derek gets worked up. "Just think about the offer, okay? It's not just about money. It's about making sure things don't get messy later. I love you." The message ended, but the room stayed thick with her voice, hanging there like smoke. I unplugged the phone and sat in silence. The clock ticked. Blue snored softly by the stove. Somewhere outside, a coyote called and another answered. I knew then that it wasn't over. When money and desperation mix with family, nothing ever ends clean. There's always another visit, another promise, another threat wrapped in a smile. I looked at the shotgun above the mantel, the metal glinting faintly in the lamplight, and felt my father's words settle again in the back of my mind. It wasn't fear anymore. It was preparation, the kind a man feels when he realizes the line has already been crossed, and all that's left is to stand his ground. The morning they came back for the third time began like any other. I woke before dawn, the air still cool, the sky pale and colorless, the world holding its breath before the heat returned. I boiled water, fed Blue, and walked out to the porch with my coffee. The wind carried that smell of dry grass and dust that always comes before a storm. I remember feeling strangely calm, almost content, like a man who has made peace with something heavy. The land stretched out before me, endless and quiet, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd imagined all of it. The letters, the threats, the cold look in my daughter's eyes. I wanted to believe that she had come to her senses, that the greed had passed like a fever. But life rarely gives you that mercy. Around noon, I saw the dust trail rising on the horizon. By the time I recognized the shape of the white SUV, the calm had already left me. I stood up slowly, my knees aching, and waited on the porch as they pulled into the yard. Sheila got out first, wearing a long blue dress that looked too formal for the country, as if she wanted to appear civilized while doing something cruel. Derek came around the other side, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky, chewing gum with that lazy arrogance of his. He didn't look at me right away. He scanned the property instead. The barn, the shed, the water tank, as though he was already dividing it in his head. Sheila walked up the porch steps carrying a folder. "Dad," she said softly, "we need to talk." I didn't invite them in this time. "You've done enough talking," I said. "Say what you came to say." She hesitated, then handed me the folder. Inside were documents, typed, notarized, and too professional to be innocent. "This is just paperwork to make things easier," she said quickly. "It's a transfer agreement. If you sign, everything's taken care of. Taxes, sale, title, all of it. You'd get your payment immediately." I looked at her, not the papers. "And what if I don't?" Derek finally looked at me then, removing his sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes that were colder than I remembered. "Then things get complicated," he said. "The company's already filed preliminary claims on the land. Once the rezoning goes through, you won't own it anymore, just the house. They can force a sale under agricultural redundancy. You'll get pennies compared to what we're offering now." I stared at him for a long moment. "You sound like you've rehearsed that," I said. "Maybe you have. You don't look like a man who came to talk. You look like a man who came to finish something." He smiled faintly. "I came to help your daughter." I looked at Sheila again, and what I saw there broke something inside me. Not greed now, not anger, but fear. She was shaking slightly, her eyes darting from me to Derek, as if she wasn't sure which one of us was the enemy. "Dad, please," she said quietly. "Just sign it. This isn't worth fighting over. You'll still have the house. You can stay as long as you want. But the land, let it go." I handed the folder back to her without looking. "That land's been in this family for 4 generations. Your grandfather built this house with his hands. Your mother's buried under that oak tree. You think I'll sign that away to strangers?" My voice rose then, not in anger, but in disbelief. "You really think I'd sell her grave?" Derek's expression hardened. He took a slow step forward, his hand resting on the table by the porch door. "You need to stop thinking like some old pioneer. The world's changed. You're clinging to a dead past. That land's worth money now, real money, and you're just sitting on it, letting it rot." "You don't know anything about this land," I said. "You've never felt what it's like to watch a storm come in across those fields, or to smell the rain when it finally breaks. You see numbers, that's all." He laughed. "Numbers don't lie." "No," I said, "but people do." Something in my tone must have struck him, because his smile faltered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, slapping it against the doorframe. "Fine. You don't want to sign? Then here, that's a notice of preliminary forfeiture. Filed yesterday. They've already started the process. You've got 30 days before it's official." I took the paper and read it. The words blurred for a second, but when I steadied my hand, I saw the signature at the bottom. It wasn't mine. It was a forgery. My name, scrawled in someone else's hand. "You forged my signature," I said quietly. Derek didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. Sheila stepped closer. "Dad, I didn't—" "Don't," I said. My voice came out sharp, and she flinched. "Don't lie to me in my own doorway." For a long moment, none of us moved. The wind picked up, sending dust swirling between us. Then Derek spoke, his voice lower, darker. "You think the law's going to save you? You think anyone cares about some stubborn old man sitting on worthless land? You're one piece of paper away from losing everything. Might as well make it easy on yourself." That was when I saw it, the faint glint of metal as his jacket shifted. A knife handle tucked into his waistband. Not big, but long enough to do damage. My heartbeat slowed, not sped up. There's a strange calm that comes when fear has no more room to grow. I looked at my daughter and said very quietly, "You need to leave now." She didn't move. Her voice was trembling when she spoke. "Derek, stop. Please. This isn't what we—" He cut her off with a glare. "You said he'd sign. He's wasting our time." I stepped back into the house, keeping my eyes on him, and for a second I saw his expression shift. He thought I was retreating. Maybe he even smiled. That's when I went to the fireplace. My father's shotgun was right where it had always been, hanging above the mantel. I took it down slowly, feeling the familiar weight settle into my hands. The wood was smooth, the metal clean. I broke it open, slid in 2 shells, and turned back toward the door. When I stepped outside again, the look on Derek's face changed completely. The arrogance vanished, replaced by something raw and uncertain. "You're not serious," he said. "Dead serious," I answered. "This is my home. You crossed a line." Sheila gasped. "Dad, put it down, please." I kept the barrel low but steady. "You brought him here," I said. "You let him talk to me like I'm already gone. You forged my name, tried to take what generations built. You wanted to see how far I'd bend. Well, this is it. I don't bend." Derek raised his hand slowly, taking a step back. "You don't want to do this. You'll go to jail." "I've been in a kind of jail for years," I said. "Locked inside this house with silence and the ghosts of people who actually loved me. Jail doesn't scare me anymore." The silence that followed felt endless. Even the cicadas had gone quiet. Then Derek spoke again, softer this time. "You won't shoot me." I lifted the barrel slightly, not to his chest, but just enough to make him freeze. "Try me." For a moment, time stood still. I could hear my pulse, feel the wind shifting the dust around our feet, smell the faint trace of gun oil and earth. Then Sheila grabbed his arm, pulling him back toward the SUV. "Let's go," she said. "Now." He hesitated, glaring at me one last time before turning away. "You just made the worst mistake of your life, old man." "Maybe," I said, "but it's mine to make." They got in the car, slammed the doors, and tore out of the yard, throwing up gravel. I stood there for a long time after they were gone, the shotgun still in my hands, the weight of it pressing into my palms. Blue whined softly beside me, his tail low. I finally unloaded the shells and set the gun back on the table. My knees felt weak. I sat down, staring at my shaking hands. It wasn't the fear that made them tremble. It was grief, the kind that comes when you realize something inside your family has died and will never come back to life again. Outside, the wind picked up and the first drops of rain began to fall, hard and cold against the porch steps. The storm had finally come. For the next 2 weeks after that night, the farm existed in a strange and heavy silence, like the pause after an argument that has gone too far to be repaired. The days went by slow, the kind of slow that feels like waiting for a verdict. Every morning I walked the property, checked the fences, fed Blue, and tried to convince myself that what had happened would be the end of it. They had been frightened, I told myself. Maybe shame had done what conscience could not. Maybe Sheila would wake up one morning and realize what she had almost allowed to happen. But deep down, I knew better. You can't undo greed once it's been fed. It keeps growing in the dark, looking for another way in. A few days later, a letter came from the county office. At first, I thought it was about taxes, but when I opened it, I saw words that made my hands go cold. It was a notice of property review, an official request for survey and zoning verification in relation to potential redevelopment. The company name on the letterhead matched the one Derek had mentioned, the so-called Renewable Energy Project. I called the office and asked for an explanation, but the clerk, polite and evasive, said only that the necessary documents had been submitted by your representative. My representative. Those two words cut deeper than any insult. Someone had filed paperwork pretending to act on my behalf. I hung up before the clerk could finish. That afternoon, I drove into town for the first time in weeks. The old Ford groaned with every mile, but it made it to the courthouse parking lot where I found the county registrar. I knew her, Donna Taylor, a kind woman who had once gone to school with my daughter. She looked startled to see me. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, "I thought you'd already handled this." "Handled what?" I asked. She hesitated, then pulled a file from a cabinet. Inside were copies of forms I had never seen before. Property reassignment, land trust authorization, digital signatures bearing my name. My name, again, written by someone else's hand. I stared at them, feeling the room tilt slightly. "Who brought these in?" I asked. Donna frowned. "A woman, your daughter, I think, and a man with her. She said you'd authorized it. Everything looked legitimate." She must have seen the color drain from my face because she added, "We can flag it for review if you're saying it's not yours." I nodded, my voice rough. "Flag it. And don't let anything move forward without my approval. Not a damn thing." I left the office shaking with anger, the kind that doesn't shout but burns steady and quiet like coals under ash. On the way home, I stopped at the sheriff's office. Sheriff Caldwell had been a deputy back when Martha was alive. He'd come to church with us a few times. He was younger than me by a good 20 years, but carried himself like someone already weary of people's stupidity. He listened while I told him what had happened, from the forged documents to the threats. When I finished, he rubbed his chin and sighed. "I can file a report, John," he said. "But unless they've physically harmed you or stolen property outright, it's a civil matter. You could get a restraining order, but that won't stop them from trying legal routes." "Legal routes?" I asked. "They forged my name." "Then you'll need a lawyer," he said gently. "And fast. This kind of thing, it moves quick when money's involved." I thanked him and left, though his words stayed with me all the way home. When I reached the house, the first thing I did was open the gun cabinet and check the shotgun. It was still there, clean and silent, the last true inheritance my father had left me. I wasn't planning to use it, not yet, but I wanted to know that it was ready. There's a comfort in readiness, a kind of control in a world that's slipping away. That night around 9, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It was Sheila. Her voice was trembling, though whether from guilt or fear I couldn't tell. "Dad," she began, "we need to talk. You don't understand what's happening. The company's serious. They've invested a lot already, and if you keep fighting this, it's going to get ugly. Derek says they can make it look like you're not mentally capable anymore. They can file for guardianship." For a moment I couldn't speak. My own daughter, the child I had once carried on my shoulders across these same fields, was telling me that strangers were preparing to declare me insane to take my land. "You'd let them do that?" I asked finally. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "You'd let them put that on me?" There was a pause, and then a small broken sound. Her voice cracking. "I don't want to, Dad. But I don't have a choice. I owe Derek's company money. I made a deal. If I don't follow through, they'll ruin me." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shallow and frightened, like a trapped animal. I wanted to feel pity, but all I could feel was a hollow, slow disgust. "You already ruined yourself, Sheila," I said quietly. "And now you're trying to take me with you." I hung up before she could answer. That night I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread out, trying to understand what to do. Every path felt like a trap. If I fought through lawyers, it would take months, maybe years, and they would bleed me dry. If I gave up, everything my father and I had built would be gone. Around midnight, the phone rang again, but I didn't move. Whoever it was left no message. Outside, the wind picked up, and I thought I saw headlights at the end of the road. But when I looked again, they were gone. The next morning, I found fresh footprints by the barn. They weren't mine, and they weren't old. Someone had come close enough to check the locks. The padlock on the feed shed was broken clean off. Nothing was missing inside, but I could feel the message in it. It wasn't theft. It was warning. They wanted me scared, uncertain, easier to manipulate. I fixed the lock, then drove into town again, this time to see a lawyer named Weston who had handled my will years ago. He listened to the story without interrupting, then nodded slowly. "You're dealing with coercive fraud, possibly attempted extortion," he said. "But they're clever. If they claim you're incompetent, they can tie this up in probate court. You'll need medical proof of sound mind." "Medical proof," I said. "I'm 81, not senile." "I believe you," he replied. "But the law believes paper. Go see your doctor, get evaluated, keep the report. Meanwhile, I'll file an injunction to freeze any transfers." That afternoon I went to Dr. Sanders, who had known me since Martha's illness. He ran the usual tests, asked questions about memory and reasoning. When he was done, he smiled faintly. "John, you're as sharp as you ever were, maybe sharper. I'll have the report notarized tomorrow." It wasn't comfort exactly, but it was something solid to hold on to. I returned home just before dusk. The house looked different in that light. Older, lonelier, like a man who's lived through too much. I fed Blue, fixed myself a simple dinner, and was about to sit when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside. My heart sank. Through the window I saw them, Shyla and Derek again, the white SUV gleaming in the half-light. This time they didn't bother to knock. They walked straight up to the porch, Derek holding a folder under his arm, Shyla behind him, pale and drawn. I opened the door before they could reach it. "You're trespassing," I said flatly. Derek smirked. "It's still family property, right? We're just visiting." "You lost that privilege the night you brought a knife into my yard." He spread his hands. "That was a misunderstanding." "Sheila," I said, turning to her, "why are you here again? Haven't you done enough?" She stepped forward, her eyes wet. "Dad, please. Derek told them you pulled a gun on us. They're saying you're dangerous. If you don't sign, they'll send deputies to serve a restraining order and start a guardianship hearing. You could lose everything. Please just sign it and let me fix this." "Fix this," I repeated. "By letting you and that snake strip my name from my own land?" Derek's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, old man." I stared at him. "Get off my porch." He took a step closer, his hand brushing his side. "You think you can scare me with that shotgun? You're bluffing." "I was bluffing last time," I said. "Not tonight." Blue began barking from inside, sharp and frantic. Derek shouted something I couldn't catch, then lunged forward, slamming the screen door open. His hand flashed, and I saw the knife, the same one he'd carried before. Sheila screamed. My body moved before my mind caught up. I grabbed the shotgun from beside the door, swung it up, and fired into the air, the blast tearing through the night like thunder. The sound froze everything, the wind, the shouting, even time itself. Derek stumbled back, his face drained of color. "Next one," I said, reloading with shaking hands. "Won't be a warning." For a few seconds, no one breathed. Then Sheila pulled at his arm, sobbing, dragging him toward the car. They scrambled inside and sped away, tires screaming against gravel. I stood there long after the sound had faded, the gun still in my hands, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. My knees gave out, and I sank onto the porch steps. Blue came to my side, pressing against my leg, trembling. I put my hand on his head and whispered, "It's over, boy. It's done." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. The next morning, the sheriff's cruiser pulled into the yard. Caldwell stepped out, hat in hand, his face serious. "John," he said, "we got a complaint. They're saying you threatened them with a firearm." I told him what happened. He listened, nodded, and after a long silence said quietly, "I believe you, but I've got to file the report. You didn't hit anyone, so it's just documentation. Still, you should be careful. They're building a case against you." When he left, I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the worn grain of the wood. The land outside the window looked calm again, the same rolling fields my father once called our church. But I could feel the war coming closer, not with guns and fences, but with lies, lawyers, and betrayal. I'd spent my whole life believing that home was the one place the world couldn't take from you. I was wrong. It just takes longer when the thief carries your last name. That night, I locked the doors, checked the windows, and sat in the living room with the shotgun across my knees, listening to the wind move through the dry grass. I wasn't waiting for trouble anymore. I knew it was already here. The night that everything broke open started quiet. Almost too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels staged. Like the world itself was holding its breath to see what I'd do. The air was heavy with the smell of rain that never came. I'd spent the day fixing the south fence, trying to keep my hands busy, but my mind wouldn't rest. Every hour since the sheriff's visit had felt like waiting for a verdict I already knew. They were going to come back, and this time it wouldn't be to talk. I didn't know how or when, but I could feel it in my bones, the way old men feel storms. I sat in the living room after dark, the lamp off, the shotgun across my lap, the same one my father cleaned by lantern light 57 years ago. The house groaned softly around me. Blue lay by my feet, his breathing steady. I wasn't afraid anymore. There's a point beyond fear, a kind of calm that comes when you've accepted that what's coming can't be stopped, only met. The clock ticked loud in the quiet. Every sound seemed magnified. The whir of the ceiling fan, the crickets outside, the distant rumble of a truck somewhere on the county road. I waited. It was close to midnight when the headlights appeared, creeping up the gravel drive without hurry, without hesitation. Blue raised his head and gave a low growl. The truck stopped just short of the porch, engine idling. I stood slowly, the weight of the gun familiar in my hands. 2 doors opened. I saw them through the window, Derek first, then Sheila. He was wearing a dark jacket despite the heat, moving with the confident recklessness of a man who's decided nothing can touch him. Sheila trailed behind, her posture slumped, her face pale under the porch light. They didn't knock this time. Derek banged the screen door open and stepped into the house like it belonged to him. "Evening, old man," he said, his voice low and mean. "We're finishing this tonight." He carried something in his hand, a folder again. But this time there was no pen inside, no papers for me to sign. I could see the glint of metal instead, a long knife tucked alongside the documents, deliberate, not hidden. Sheila's voice trembled. "Derek, please don't." "Shut up," he snapped, not even looking at her. He turned to me. "You had your chance to do this the easy way. You think that gun scares me? You won't use it. You don't have it in you." I didn't move, didn't speak. The shotgun rested steady in my hands, the barrels angled just low enough to show restraint. "You're on private property," I said. "Leave now." He laughed, the sound sharp and joyless. You think anyone cares about your property? You've already lost it. Papers went through this morning. Your daughter signed everything. You're done. I looked at her then. She was shaking her head, tears gathering in her eyes. I didn't mean to, she whispered. He said it was just temporary, to hold the land in trust until he sold it out from under you, I finished for her. My voice was quieter than I expected. And now you've got nothing left to sell but your soul. Derek took another step forward. The knife flashed in his hand, catching the light. You're gonna regret talking to her like that. Blue barked suddenly, loud and fierce, launching himself between us. Derek flinched, kicking out. The dog yelped, but didn't back away. Something inside me snapped then. Not rage, not panic, but a cold certainty that this moment had been waiting for me all along. My father's voice echoed in my head as clear as the day he'd said it. Land's worth nothing if you can't defend it. I raised the shotgun. Derek froze. The world narrowed to the small space between us. The smell of gun oil and fear thickened the air. Get out, I said, my voice calm. Right now. He smirked, trying to call my bluff one last time. You won't shoot. He took a step closer. That was all it took. I fired. The blast filled the room, deafening, final. The recoil slammed into my shoulder, the echo rolling through the house like thunder. Derek stumbled back, dropping the knife, his eyes wide with shock more than pain. The shell tore into the doorframe beside him, missing him by inches, but shredding the papers he'd been holding. He fell hard onto the porch, scrambling backward on his hands, gasping, his face pale and slick with sweat. Next one won't miss, I said. My voice barely sounded like mine anymore. Sheila was screaming, kneeling beside him, but he shoved her away, scrambled to his feet, and ran to the truck. She followed, sobbing, and they tore out of the yard, tires spitting gravel and mud. I stood in the doorway, the smoke curling around me, the smell of burnt powder filling the room. Blue limped toward me, tail low, and I knelt to touch his head, whispering, It's all right now, boy. It's all right. But it wasn't. It would never be all right again. For a long time I stayed there, frozen in the quiet aftermath. The adrenaline drained out of me, leaving only exhaustion. My hands shook as I reloaded, more out of ritual than need. The walls of the house seemed to pulse with silence. Outside, the night stretched wide and empty. I sat down on the porch steps, the shotgun resting across my knees, and watched the horizon until the first hint of dawn colored the sky. At sunrise, the sheriff's car came up the road. Caldwell got out slowly, his expression grave, but not surprised. He walked up to the porch, taking in the sight of the splintered doorframe and the shell casing glinting on the floor. "You all right, John?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," I said. "They're gone." He sighed. "They called it in. Said you fired at them without warning." "They're lying." "I know." He looked at the ground for a moment, then back at me. "Still, I've got to take your statement." I told him everything, the break-in, the threats, the knife, the shot into the wall. He wrote it all down, slow and careful, his face unreadable. When I finished, he closed his notebook and said, "You did what you had to do. You didn't hit anyone, and it's clear they trespassed. I'll file the report as defensive action. But, John, you might want to think about locking things down tighter. People like that don't quit easy." I nodded. "I know." When he left, I sat for a while longer, the morning light creeping across the yard. The fields looked peaceful, deceptively so, as if nothing had happened. But the world had changed overnight. The line between me and them, between what was mine and what they wanted, had been burned clean through. Later that day, I called my lawyer. He told me that the county had already received notice from Sheila, withdrawing her authorization. The forged documents were invalidated, the sale frozen pending investigation. "You're in the clear for now," he said. "But it's going to be messy." "Messy," I repeated. "That's one word for it." After I hung up, I walked out to the field. The earth smelled damp and alive from the rain that had finally fallen in the early hours. I stood under the oak tree where Martha was buried and felt the weight of it all pressing down. Grief, anger, love, the whole long history of this place. I thought about Sheila as a little girl, running through the same grass, her laughter echoing in the wind. I thought about the way she'd looked last night, terrified and lost, caught between the man she'd chosen and the father she'd betrayed. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. By evening, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a strange clarity. The fight was over, at least the part that could be fought with hands and guns. What remained was something quieter but heavier, the kind of wound that doesn't bleed but never fully heals. I cleaned the shotgun one last time, oiled it, and hung it back on the mantel. Then I sat down at the table with pen and paper and rewrote my will. I changed everything. The land would not go to Sheila, nor to her children. It would go to the local veterans shelter and to a young couple from down the road who had helped me during the drought 2 summers back. People who understood what soil meant, who would work it, respect it, and never see it as a number on a contract. When I finished, I sealed the papers in an envelope and placed it beside Martha's photograph. Outside, the sky turned red with sunset, the kind of red that looks like the end of something. I poured myself a small glass of bourbon, sat on the porch, and watched the light fade over the fields. The cicadas started singing again, loud and steady, as if to remind me that the world keeps moving even when we think it's stopped. For the first time in months, I felt still. Not peaceful, not happy, just still. The storm had come and gone, and the house was still standing. So was I. It's been 6 months since that night, and the land has gone quiet again. The kind of quiet that doesn't threaten, but simply lives alongside you, like an old companion who no longer asks questions. The grass has come back green, taller than I've seen it in years. The oak by the hill stands heavy with leaves, shading the place where Martha rests. The scars on the porch where the shotgun kicked are still there, a pair of small gouges in the wood. Reminders that peace, like everything worth keeping, has its price. I don't sand them out. I want them there, part of the record. The sheriff came by once more in early spring, said the case had been closed. Derek had left town, skipped his job, maybe his debts too. Sheila moved to Tulsa again, working somewhere in real estate. The irony not lost on anyone. I haven't heard her voice since. The lawyer says the land title is clean now, no claims, no disputes. The papers are sealed in the county vault under my name, and my new will sits in a folder by the fireplace. It's strange how final those small details can feel, how ink and signatures can close a lifetime's worth of chaos. The days follow the same rhythm as before, but they carry a different weight. I wake early, walk the fence line, talk to Blue, who's slower now, his eyes clouded but faithful. Sometimes I catch him staring out toward the road, and I wonder if he's waiting for her too. I tell him she's not coming back, though I say it softly, like a man telling himself something he doesn't fully believe. There's a part of me that still listens for the sound of her car, still half expects to see her walking up the drive, her shoulders hunched the way they used to be when she was ashamed or scared. I imagine she'll come one day, maybe not to apologize, but simply to stand here, to see what she tried to destroy and what still stands without her. The neighbors started talking after the story got around. Some treat me like a folk hero now, the old farmer who stood his ground. They bring pies, shake my hand, call me brave. I thank them, but I don't feel brave. I feel old. I feel like a man who finally learned how small victory really is. People think justice comes clean, with a ribbon and a gavel. But it doesn't. It comes late, half-hearted, and costs more than you can ever pay. There's no celebration when you win against your own blood. Just quiet and the long, slow process of learning to forgive what you can't forget. Once, a few weeks back, I found a letter wedged in the mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was hers. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume, the one Martha used to tease her for wearing too much of. I didn't open it at first. I carried it in my pocket for 3 days before I could. When I finally did, it wasn't an apology, not really. Just a few shaky lines. I was wrong. I didn't know how to stop. I hope you're safe. I hope one day you'll remember me before all this. That was all. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it in the family Bible, between the pages of Psalms, where Martha's wedding ring rests. I didn't write back. Some things are better left in the hands of time. Summer's coming now. The fields shimmer at noon, and the air hums with life. I find myself sitting on the porch more often, watching the world move slow, the way it's supposed to. I talk to Martha sometimes out loud, though I don't care who hears. I tell her about the crops, about Blue, about the lawyer's letters. I tell her the land is safe again, at least for now. And I tell her about Sheila, that I hope she's found some peace, wherever she is. Martha would want that. She was always softer than me, better at forgiveness. There are nights when the wind blows just right and the house feels full again. Her voice in the hallway. Sheila laughing from the porch, the smell of cornbread from the oven. It passes, of course, but it's enough. Enough to remind me that this land still holds more than pain. It holds memory, too. And memory, when it's honest, is its own kind of grace. I suppose I've made my peace with how things turned out. The law never fixed what was broken between us, but it stopped the bleeding. That's as close to redemption as most of us ever get. Sometimes, when I'm walking the fence line at dusk and the sky turns that deep, forgiving gold, I think of my father, of the shotgun, of the lesson he left me. Land's worth nothing if you can't defend it. I used to think he meant against thieves or neighbors. Now I know he meant against time itself, the slow erosion of belonging, the temptation to sell what should be kept, the forgetting of where you come from. I keep the gun oiled and clean, though I doubt I'll ever fire it again. It hangs above the mantel where it's always been, gleaming in the light from the window. A relic, a warning, and a promise. When the day comes that I leave this world, it'll go to the young couple I named in the will, the ones who still work the soil with their hands. Maybe they'll hang it somewhere new. Maybe they'll use it. Either way, it'll stay here, on this land. And when people ask them who owned it before, maybe they'll tell the story about an old man who lived out his last years guarding 40 acres of dirt and memory, who lost his daughter but kept his name, who learned too late that love can rot when it's mixed with money, but who never let go of what was honest and earned. Maybe they'll say his name with a kind of quiet respect, or maybe they won't say it at all. Maybe the wind will carry it instead, across the fields, through the oak branches, out toward the road where the dust never settles. That would be enough for me, because the truth is, everything that mattered has already been said. The land is still here. The house still stands. The shotgun still hangs above the hearth. And I'm still breathing the same air my father did, on the same ground he swore I'd protect. In the end, that's all any man can ask, to leave the world no worse than he found it, and to rest knowing he kept his word.